This and more coming up on The Whitney Reynolds Show.
I was born missing my right leg, and it was kind of crazy because back then they didn't have the technology that they have now. So the doctors did not expect it.
Domestic violence can happen to anyone. And there's this perception out there that doesn't happen to somebody who's educated.
And it wasn't until I was on my trip to St. Bart's that I get a call that they found something. And that was a non-invasive tumor until I went back again for an MRI, and then they found a second invasive tumor.
The Whitney Reynolds Show is supported by BMO. Boldly grow the good in business and life. The Together at Peace Foundation. Remembrance, resilience, and comfort. Creating a hopeful space for those who are grieving. Kevin O'Connor Law Firm. When it comes to your injuries, we take it personally. 10 West Real Estate Group. Providing multifamily investment and property management services. Center for Beautiful Living. Empowering people to live rich, robust, and beautiful lives. Additional funding provided by facial plastic surgeon Dr. Stacy McLean. Lifeway Kiefer. Respiratory Health Association. Kevin Kelly. Kid-Friendly Venues app. JoePerillo.com. High Five Sports Club. And by these sponsors.
Hello and welcome to The Whitney Reynolds Show. Today we are talking about inner strength. Our guest met the storm, saw it eye to eye, and emerged not only unbroken, but also empowered. Awakening the soul of our stories.
Come for the stories, stay for the heart, where every journey is
and sharing those in a safe space to inspire others.
And all you'll see. Whitney's here to share your dream. It's the Whitney Reynolds
You are watching the Whitney Reynolds Show.
From
Be
Chicago
careful.
to your home. Real voices, real lives in every episode. This is the Whitney Reynolds Show.
Born with just one leg, Anthony Robles faced adversity from the very beginning. He's proof that the obstacle, and you know we all have them, you, me, we all do, they're a little different, but those obstacles can actually be the thing that lights the fire in our spirit.
So why do you do this? Why do you wrestle?
When people look at me, the first thing they see is what's missing.
From the mat to the big screen, Anthony Robles is unstoppable. Born with one leg, he defies all odds in the world of wrestling. And now his inspiring story is coming to Amazon. Tell the viewers a little bit about your history.
So, I was born missing my right leg, and it was kind of crazy because back then they didn't have the technology that they have now. So the doctors did not expect it. And so basically my mom was there, and they took me out of the operating room. She's like, "Where are you taking my son? I want to see my son." And they came back to her and told her he was born missing his right leg. And growing up, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why kids and adults would be looking at me as I'm walking down the street. But luckily I was blessed with an amazing mother who always taught me to not focus on what I didn't have. And so that was just my mentality from here growing up. Just do the best of what I had, and that everything was for a reason.
So many of us, we have all these different things going on. And I might not be missing a leg, but I had a challenging childhood as well. And with that, how did you get to that point of not moving past it, but channeling that?
I started to learn that through wrestling when I got introduced to it, because growing up, everyone said focus on what I couldn't do. But that wrestling mat was my platform to kind of control the narrative of my life. And it's like I have the power now to show people it didn't matter what I didn't have, and it didn't matter what opponent I was facing, whether it was flesh and blood or something else. And I think that's how I see the world, and I think that everyone else in it needs to see it the same way. It's, you're going to have a challenge. You're going to have something that's negative or that can hold you back. But what is your mentality and what is your focus throughout all of it? You ultimately have the power to respond to an opponent the way you want to respond to it. You focus on what you can't do, then you're never going to be able to accomplish what you want.
The champ is here! It's a celebration dinner for Anthony!
Wow, and your mom in the movie was such a strong mom and was played by J-Lo. I want to know, was your mom just thrilled when they said, okay, J-Lo's going to play your role, and the way it came off?
Yeah, she absolutely was excited about it. And I got to break the news to her over the phone, and she didn't believe me. She's like, "You're joking, right? This isn't reality." And, but Jennifer Lopez did an outstanding job just portraying my mom, her strong essence. And, I tell people my mom was my mom and my dad growing up. She's my hero, and she's someone I learned so much from as a kid. So to have Jennifer Lopez play her and to really understand her and how important she was to me, it was very special.
Yeah, the bond that you and your mom share. Walk us through how that made you this unstoppable person you are.
It was interesting just growing up because inside my household, my family, and especially my mom, she never made missing a leg a big deal. But when I stepped outside of the house, it seemed like everybody else in the world did. They saw me for what I didn't have, and I didn't understand it. But coming home every day from school, when I was doubting myself and just having those self-confidence issues, it was my mom that would kind of recharge me again, to go out back in the world. So just continuously doing that throughout my life, it helped me to fight those daily battles.
And your mom experienced domestic violence. Tell me, did seeing that in your household maybe give you that extra fire to become so strong and be able to protect?
It absolutely did. And I think in wrestling, when I got introduced to wrestling, I used that in a way, just to my extra training to get stronger, to be able to protect my family. And but I think I was able to use those negative things as motivation, to find a way to kind of improve myself throughout those trials and things that were thrown my way that could hold me back. My mom and I, we started our own foundation charity, the Ropeless Unstoppable Foundation.
Unstoppable Foundation, yes.
We're just trying to really give back to our community.
Wow.
And I know there's people, like I said, that are wrestling through things in their lives.
Well, and you lived not only through making the team, but you also lived through a time when the program got cut, and then it came back. But when it came back, tell the viewers.
I'll never forget just getting that phone call that it had been cut. I remember just working at my job at the airport, and my phone was ringing, and so I finally answered one of the calls, and it was actually from a reporter asking, what are your thoughts on ASU dropping their program? And I felt like someone just took the floor out from underneath me. I was like, everything I had worked for was just immediately gone all over again, and that was heartbreaking. But for the Arizona State alumni to come together, the wrestling alumni, to basically donate money to self-endow the program for a few years, that was special. It kept me home. They offered me the full ride wrestling scholarship,
which is huge. A full ride.
Absolutely.
I was still waiting on mine from Baylor. Yeah, and they brought you back, and that's when you really started channeling that inner champion. When did you know that you could win it all?
Well, I think coming through as a high school wrestler, it was always my dream to wrestle at the national championship and be a national champ. But I'd say it really mentally it was something that I felt like it could be a reality my junior year. I think I was always chasing it as a goal, but my junior year, believe it or not, when I lost and I got that stack of letters from the group of third graders, that inspired me to get to the mountaintop, because I felt like up until that point, I was kind of wrestling to prove a point, to try to prove people wrong. Like, you're wrong. I can do this. I can do this. But now these kids, they were inspiring me in a way to show them that anything was possible.
Oh, yeah.
And so for me, it was wrestling at a different level for a different cause.
Wow.
It wasn't just a medal anymore. And so that for me is like, man, I'm going to go out there and just give it my all. And I felt like, it was special my senior year.
It was very special. I felt like when I was watching, I was there with you. I was chanting with everybody else. I do want to go to this point, though, that you said, and it was about the goal, and that, like, if you don't have the dream to chase after, what am I doing? And this is a moment where I felt like, okay, did you have to cultivate another dream after that? Because as we know, college does come to an end. How did you, after graduation, reformat kind of what your dream was?
Yeah, that was a difficult time in my life. I remember winning my championship and thinking, what do I do next? What's next in my life? And it was actually a credit to one of my assistant wrestling coaches at ASU. And, I'm talking to him and telling him I'm trying to figure things out. He's like, well, you know what? Those kids really touched your life. Why don't you use that, and try to touch others? And so I really started to look into public speaking and really just trying to give back.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be where I am today without those special people in my life, like my mom, like my coaches, those kids. They motivated me, when I needed it. And it's like, if I could do that for someone else, that'd be a really cool way to live and to give back.
In the movie, we saw that a box of cards came your way of just like people that saw you persevere through your way to win. When you first got in, you went out as a walk-on and you had a whole other scholarship somewhere else. That's another big decision that you had to make. Is it just because you doubled down on yourself?
I did, and it was weird because I remember, coming out of high school and just, I in a way, I felt very disrespected just because I felt like I had the resume. I was a high school state champ. I had great grades, and the colleges still didn't recruit me. and for what they saw as something that can hold me back. And so, that to me was something, it was extra motivation, and people thought I was crazy when I turned down Drexel. And, I was telling myself in my head I was crazy, but I just remember this voice in my head saying, you're not supposed to be there, that this isn't home for you. And, it was very important for me to be around my family. I felt like they were my strength, but also I wanted to be their protector at certain points. And so to be home, it was definitely a harder journey to go through, but it was worth it. And I think looking back on that journey, the challenges, through the trials, it made me stronger. And so I'm grateful for that now. I would say that, everyone reaches their breaking point at certain times in their life, but that's normal. That's what makes you human. But the key thing is take a moment. When you get to that point, just take a moment, take a breath, and ask yourself, how am I going to respond to this? Because there might be a list of reasons to where you can't accomplish your goal, but there might be one reason to where you can actually accomplish it. So focus on that one thing. Focus on that one thing in your life that you have, and just use that to your advantage to the very end. Because you could be that 1%. You could be the one with the missing leg who becomes the national champ, but it's going to start and it's going to end up here.
You are a true champion, inside and out. Thank you so much for coming on. In every corner of our communities, there are deep stories, sometimes behind closed doors. Our next guest is breaking the stigma and opening the door on her story when it comes to domestic violence. Rewriting the narrative around domestic violence is the goal of Tracy Meyer. She believes that every victim has the power to take back control and emerge as a victor, even from their darkest chapters. A story that once encountered pain now echoes so much empowerment. She's gone public with it to remind others they too can reclaim their voice and change the conversation around domestic violence. What I'm really connecting with your story is all these things were happening and then it spiraled and here you are.
Domestic violence can happen to anyone. And there's this perception out there that doesn't happen to somebody who's educated.
And there's women and even men. I mean, abuse happens on both sides, but there are people watching today that are probably in that same whittled down posture you were in. It's like, how the heck did I get here?
So what I would say to them is, you are not alone. And if you feel like something isn't right, trust your instinct. When you're dealing with a person who's manipulative, and when the gaslighting comes in, they're intentionally trying to tap dance with your brain. That is the whole motivation, to get you to begin questioning everything to the point where you think, am I going nuts? What I would say to somebody else is, the only person who has control over your brain and your mind is you.
After going through her divorce with her longtime partner and father to her kids, she started dating and thought she had met someone who checked all the boxes. Full of hope, she uprooted her life and took a leap for love. Yet that leap took a very dark turn. You got into a relationship, and that relationship turned violent.
I was in a bad car accident years ago, and I ended up with an injury. It's called cervical dizziness. If there's pressure put on my cervical spine on 2 discs, it literally will make me dizzy and nauseous. He knew that, so he would put his arm around my neck, and he would push on that area. He would pinch me, and he would force me to lay certain ways in bed that he knew were uncomfortable. It's sick. And I couldn't prove it. I couldn't prove that happened. By the grace of God, I found the strength to pull myself up.
There was that moment of, I got to pull myself out of this.
Yes. And I remember the day that I stood and I looked in the mirror, and I didn't recognize the woman who was looking back at me. I can ebb and flow all day long with everything else, but the goalpost does not shift when it comes to my core values. I looked in the mirror and said, who is this woman? I don't know her. Scared the hell out of me, and was the day that I said, all right, I don't care what it takes. I am going to plan my escape. I have to get out of here.
At that moment, did you ever feel that your life was in danger, not only mentally, but your real life could be in danger?
Yes. I knew he had access to unlimited resources, right?
Right.
Probably had 7, 8 attorneys on his team alone. So in my mind, I'm spinning all this like, what chance do I stand against this guy if I try to, fight him in any way? I didn't say a word about any of this. When things were so bad, I didn't tell my family or anyone because I didn't want anybody to worry about me.
You're touching on something interesting about being a mom. You don't want your kids to worry about you.
I didn't want my
But
mother, I didn't
yeah.
want my boys to worry about me. I felt like I needed to figure out what I was going to do first. But I also think there was part of me that was pushing that off because I felt so stupid.
Why was there shame?
I felt like you are an intelligent woman, you were a great mom, your marriage wasn't bad, you came from a great family, you have wonderful friends. How could I not be more aware of these things? How could I let this happen to me? What did I miss?
And there are so many people relating with you right now
Right,
in that
like
thought.
what did I miss? Because here's the thing, and I know this now because I work in this space, is we end up blaming ourselves. What did I do wrong? You feel the shame and the embarrassment because you think you're the problem. And that's not true. It is never, ever the fault of the victim.
You're saying, hey, I felt shame. I experienced this firsthand, and maybe some women aren't me and can get out. So now you are helping other people in similar situations.
I don't know, honestly, what provoked me, but I was part of a North Shore women's mom group on Facebook. It's like 17,000 women. I went on there and I posted 3 or 4 sentences about what happened to me.
And this was the first time you were really putting it out there.
And I just briefly said what happened to me. And although I'm surrounded by all this love, I feel so alone. And I had 262 women respond to that post.
By sharing her own story, she's helping others find their strength to reclaim their voices. By changing the conversation around domestic violence, she's helping people find community and healing. Tracy now works with the nonprofit Wings in the domestic violence space, supporting victors to find strength and rise above.
Isn't it remarkable, though, that when you do release your story and you typed those 3 sentences, how this just wave of I am okay and I live to tell the story and now I'm helping others.
And along the way, educating myself and learning more about domestic violence, which I did just on my own, and learning very quickly that it was not my fault. And although I owned that shame for quite some time, it was never mine to own.
How did you free yourself of that? Because I love that what you're saying, but I feel like there's probably people watching at home that still have not been able just to free themselves.
Yeah, I think for me, I never felt sorry for myself.
It's a hard subject.
Right, it's really tough. But cancer was hard to talk about 20 years ago too. Mental health was hard to talk about 5 years ago. It's not anymore, right? We need to get to that place where we can talk about this subject in a more open and relaxed way. So how can I make that happen? Coming from a background of luxury fashion and beauty, which is beautiful and joyous, I thought, what if I start creating events and ways to bring people together in that type of space where they're showing up for something they really enjoy, but then we have that window of opportunity to engage them in what we're doing, and we have that opportunity to educate, engage, and find a way to touch their heartstrings. Domestic violence is pervasive. It affects 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men in their lifetime. So we're not talking about something that's like 1 in 1,000.
It is
right?
A high number.
Start counting the heads. Like anywhere you're at the gym, you're on the train, you're on a flight, you're out to dinner, just start counting heads. And that's how many people that close to you. When we say to people, everyone knows someone, we say it because it's true. You may not know who that person is,
right?
But everyone knows someone. But we have to find more ways to teach people and show them how it is relevant, how it is relatable, and how they need to, instead of turning away from it, find the courage to turn toward it. Every single week I talk to women, and in the course of our conversation, they discover they have been abused and didn't even know it. You have so many blessings. You need to find the silver lining in your experience and use it to help other people. And once I turn that corner, there was no stopping me.
Well, I am one of those heads, and so I appreciate you for being bold with your story so we realize we're not alone. Thank you so much for coming
Thanks
on.
for having me, Whitney.
It takes courage to do what Tracy did here today. Continuing with another strong woman, we sat down with a real housewife of Miami whose reality shaped her inner strength. Welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here with you.
You just have this energy. You walked into the studio and everything just got brighter.
You know, you're not for everyone. It's what I realized in life. And I'm a Haitian-born girl that was raised in Paris and that came to the U.S. without speaking a word of English. And obviously teased and bullied and so forth. And I knew that I had something in me that, you know, was unique. And I kept that resilience through and through while I was learning a new language and battling a lot of different obstacles.
A vibrant soul and living a glamorous life, Gertie Abrera, known for the Real Housewives of Miami, walks us through her newfound reality.
I walked out of there saying, okay, on to St. Bart's I'm going. And it wasn't until I was on my trip to St. Bart's that I get a call that they found something. And that was a non-invasive tumor until I went back again for an MRI. And then they found a second invasive tumor. So it was a trickle down, slow trickle of information. And that's what, you know, people don't understand. Like you don't just get diagnosed and it's a flat out deal where there's A and B solution and it's not a perfect formula. There's always a wave because there's different tests and different tests tells you different diagnosis. So it was a very layered process where it started out with me just needing a lumpectomy surgery. And I was like, yes, I can do this. And then for me needing chemo and radiation, yada, yada, yada. And so the journey was definitely emotional roller coaster that I wanted to get off from.
So for your family, how did they cope with this diagnosis as well?
He's so funny because my husband just recently was telling me we're going to couples therapy. And that's another thing as far as like, you know, post-cancer, you have PTSD. And so, you know, he was bottling so much strength and so forth that his emotions were deep down inside. And so now we're going to counseling because we want to make sure that everyone's able to move forward to our new normal. You can't go back there. Whatever happened in the past is the past. You're a new person. You know, it's an evolution. But it takes a toll on the whole family. And so our goal was just to create a safety net for the kids emotionally and to be like, mom is going to be okay. That's the end result. Now, how we get there is going to be a little rough, but we're going to make it and mom is going to be okay. So that's why we held on to the hope and that little light at the end of the tunnel.
You've mentioned the word hope a few times. Was that what carried you through?
It's hope and strength. And focus, you know, it's a little bit of everything. There's a medley and it may not work for some people. Maybe some other people is something else, but you have to try to articulate and figure out exactly what works for you to be able to push through. Because one thing that I realized in fighting was you have to take it second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour. And I'm a planner. So my goal was like, how do I get better? I don't want to know about this. I want just have end result. And everyone's like, no, ma'am, no, ma'am, no, ma'am. Sit down, have a seat. It's going to be a slow drip, you know? So I had to learn how to like refocus my mind and release the control that I usually have because I now became a patient where I had no control. So you have to understand, for me, it was very difficult because I know there's a lot of us women, A-type personalities, which most of us do get breast cancer because of the stress, I think. But it was for me to be like, okay, let me swallow this big, humbling pill.
And you said you had to retrain your brain. For the viewers at home that could be maybe not in the same situation, but, you know, in this whole like having to reformat. How did you do that? Was there something that helped you get there?
Well, I just try to use words because I feel like with words, there's definition and there's meaning. So I was like, okay, be selfish. What does that look like? Selfish. In the morning, do I go straight to my kitchen and make my kids breakfast? No. Guys, let me show you how to make eggs. Now they're on their own. So now I get up, I do my breathing exercises. I get up, I take a 5-mile walk if I can. I take care of me. Self-care is so important. Even just like, you know, the best lotions and investing in all those things that make you feel good. You feel good, you look good. You look good, you do good. And so it's a trickle-down effect in all that in all those ways. And I'm trying to act them out to the best of my ability, you know, so yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Let me catch you up.
The Outer Banks stars also weighed in on today's topic. Head over to the PBS app and search Whitney Reynolds for their interview.
Inner strength is not just about facing adversity. It's about knowing your worth and rising after the fall. Remember, your story matters.
The Whitney Reynolds Show is supported by BMO, Boldly Grow the Good in Business and Life. The Together at Peace Foundation, Remembrance, Resilience, and Comfort, creating a hopeful space for those who are grieving. Kevin O'Connor Law Firm, when it comes to your injuries, we take it personally. 10 West Real Estate Group, providing multifamily investment and property management services. Center for Beautiful Living, empowering people to live rich, robust, and beautiful lives. Additional funding provided by facial plastic surgeon Dr. Stacy McLean, Lifeway Kiefer, Respiratory Health Association, Kevin Kelly, Kid Friendly Venues app, JoePerillo.com, High Five Sports Club, and by these sponsors.
Want to stay connected to all things Whitney Reynolds? Well, follow us on social media, and you'll get exclusive content and updates from the show. All episodes are available for streaming anytime.